Myth. Look, I liked the pick. We talked about Trey Johnson a lot on the show yesterday in particular. That was of the guys that were more likely than not going to be there at 6. That's who I wanted. I think that Trey Johnson comes into this league with something that you're guaranteed to get. You don't know about a lot of things when they're 18 or 19 years old, but when you can shoot the basketball like he can, and he is a very good shooter. I mean, the stroke is perfect. It's perfect off the bounce. It's perfect off the catch. It's perfect posting up and fading away. It's perfect at the free throw line. When you get a player that can shoot, that's something that never goes away. I mean, he'll be 75 and he'll still be burying jump shots from 23, 24 feet. So they got something in Trey Johnson that he'll bring to the NBA. Now, all of the rest of it, can he guard? Can he play pick and roll? Can he get to the rim? Can he finish at the rim? Can he play in all sorts of different environments and systems and with certain kinds of players versus others? We'll learn all that. He's 19 years old. What you saw at Texas was you saw a guy who was legitimately high-level competitor, fearless. His very first game, we talked about some of his games on the show yesterday. His very first game, Ohio State in Vegas, he goes out and gets 29. On 20 shot attempts in his first game as a true freshman, 10 threes. He was 5 for 10 from behind the arc. He was 10 for 20 from the floor, and he had 29 points. In the SEC, you played against the best. That league last year was unbelievable. It basically, what did we have at one point? 4 of the top 5 teams in the country were out of the SEC. Florida, Auburn, Alabama, and Tennessee. I think we're all in the top 5 simultaneously. Kentucky was really good. Ole Miss was good. Texas A&M was good. Arkansas came on at the end of the year. The league was brutal. So he went against the best, and he did well against the best. And, yeah, there were nights where he didn't shoot it well. There were nights where he was held down a bit. But this guy, if you watched anything leading into the draft, even if it was just highlights, which does not tell the whole story, you realize that this dude was highly competitive, that he is not only a shooter, but a scorer, and he's absolutely fearless and confident. I don't know what the hell he was wearing last night with the white socks. It looked a little bit odd, but I loved the interview that he did with his father, with Monica McNutt. I thought that was a great interview, and he ribbed his father a little bit for kind of forgetting his age. But I love Trey Johnson. I was not an Ace Bailey guy. Ace Bailey is incredibly talented, but look, we're not going to ever need to, debate that because he wasn't available. He went very surprisingly to him to Utah at number 5, the pick before the Wizards picked. There was a lot of discussion about Ace Bailey on the pregame and during those first picks, the pre-draft process that was not handled well, at least based on how NBA teams viewed it. And that was one of the reasons he had been mocked for 2 years in the top 3 and was potentially falling to the Wizards at 6 or perhaps even further than that. Some suggested that Ace Bailey had a deal in hand, had a commitment from a team in hand, and that's why he ditched the pre-draft process. He was okay going to, say, the Wizards at 6. Well, it turns out he goes to Utah at 5, and he claims there was no deal, and he was surprised and said he had no clue that they were interested in him. So we'll never have to debate unless you feel like they should have been aggressive in trying to trade up. And look, there were stories out there earlier in the week that the Wizards were interested in trading up. We don't know if it was for Bailey. It could have been for Edgecombe. It could have been for Dylan Harper. Could have been for Knuppel. Who knows who it was for? But they weren't able to trade up, even if there was some interest in trading up. They did not have the choice of Ace Bailey and other players. They had the choice of Trey Johnson, if you were a Jeremiah Fears fan, if you were. I was very surprised to see Jaeger Demon, the player that I was hoping the Wizards at 18, if they didn't get Derek Queen in a trade up, I was hoping Demon might be there at 18, or they might only have to trade up a few spots. I saw his mocks from anywhere from 12 to 22. So when he went 8, I was surprised. I thought he was the best passer of the players that I watched in sort of looking ahead to this draft. And at 6'8", 6'9", that he was actually going to be able to play point guard in the NBA. He went 8 overall. I doubt the Wizards were going to take him at 6, but who knows? Well, they didn't, because they took Trey Johnson. I love Trey Johnson as a college player, as a one-year college player, as a 19-year-old. I think this guy has a chance to be a big-time scorer in the NBA. We'll find out. One thing he can do, there is no doubt about this, he can shoot it. And I think he can score, not just as a shooter, but as an off-the-dribble creator scorer, as a post-up at 6'5", 6'6". So I'm excited about Trey Johnson. I think, with Carrington, with, it'll be C.J. McCollum. Look, with C.J. McCollum and Marcus Smart on the roster, you've got 2 veteran players who are also 2 high IQ veteran players. In Smart's case, high IQ and highly competitive. It'll be a good, I think, developmental situation for Trey Johnson. And then the Wizards at 18 traded back. And I got to tell you, man, at 18, I kept thinking Walter Clayton Jr. We talked about him a lot. I didn't understand why he was being mocked in the 20s, somewhere from like 22 to 28. You saw with Clayton Jr., it didn't make any sense to me. I thought he should have been in the lottery personally. But when he was there at 18, which we expected he would be, and the Wizards were on the clock, I'm like, that's who they have to take. They've got to take Walter Clayton Jr. I don't care that he's, an old man at 22. I don't care that he played 4 years of college basketball, not all of it at high level, the last 2 at Florida. The guy is a big-time scorer. He is a separator. He's got a quick release. He is clutch. There was some, talk about they didn't think he was a good decision maker and pick and roll. I didn't see that. And sure enough, Washington at 18, on behalf of the Utah Jazz, after they traded back, the Utah Jazz selected Walter Clayton Jr. at 18. I saw that the trade was in the process of being made. And then when I saw who Utah took, I was like, you've got to be kidding me. So the Wizards went back, and at 21, they took Will Riley, another player that we mentioned yesterday. I said at 18, here are the guys that if they took them, I wouldn't be upset. And Will Riley was one of those guys. Will Riley was the 6th man of the year in the Big Ten, another super competitive, high motor, player. He can really shoot it. I watch a lot of Big Ten basketball, Maryland, obviously in particular, but watch a bunch of Big Ten games. And that's kind of it this past year until the tournament or late in the season, in part because we had a really good football team that was playing deep into January. But Will Riley just kept getting more minutes, getting more trust. And you could see he could play. Like, he had NBA potential. And I liked the pick. They traded back and got a guy that I'm sure they felt like they could get at 21, because I think for the most part, Will Riley was late first round projected, mid to late 20s, some second round in mocks. I like Will Riley. I liked watching him this year when he was at Illinois. Illinois is one of the few Big Ten teams that plays kind of an NBA style. They play a lot of up-tempo, a lot of taking it out of the, off the rim and pushing it, taking it out of the bucket and inbounding it and getting it up court. They've always played that way. And I like both picks. I would have preferred Clayton Jr. I would have preferred a trade up to get Derek Queen. Yes, Derek Queen would have been phenomenal, even with a trade up. Who else in this draft at 18? At 18, honestly, I was like, it's Clayton Jr. And then when they traded back, I was like, well, Will Riley's on the board and the guy Newell is on the board. We talked a little bit about him. I think Nick Clifford's on the board. I know we talked about him from Colorado State, the kid who had a great game against Maryland in the tournament. We talked about Jace Richardson from Michigan State, Jason Richardson's son. So there were a bunch of guys there. So any of those guys I would have been fine with. I liked the draft, but what the hell do we know? 18, 19 years old.